Hey everybody, Mark Major here. I am at the Action Figuratorium and I am draped in what is known as indoor scarf. Today is another episode of Toy Talk. This is my musings on the toy industry. Today we are going to be asking a simple question, very simple question. And that question is, who owns Masters of the Universe? So stick around. Okay, there's going to be a little bit of catch up in terms of history for the folks out there. I know a lot of you guys have probably already seen some of these arguments online and you just want to see if there's an update. Don't worry, we're going to go over some things. Everyone take it down a notch, okay? This is going to be great. So, a couple things that are not in doubt. This is sort of my round one of history catch up. Mattel created Masters of the Universe and the He-Man Skeletor characters, that whole bit, 1981. Action figures came out in 1982. Included with the action figures were 4 mini comics. We're going to get back into the mini comics later. They play into this. It's a good story. Stick with me. In 1983, Filmation partners with Mattel to make a animated kids TV show. In doing so, they end up and Filmation, that is, owning the library of the episodes, all the specific shows themselves, right? As well as getting rights to characters that they created. For example, when they're writing the show and they say, look, we want kind of a really annoying floating wizard in here named Orko, they just write it in and he shows up. And now if Mattel wants to make an Orko action figure, well, they're going to have to pay money to Filmation. And I believe that this is sort of the origins of where characters like Jar Jar Binks come from in our culture. So if you disagree, throw it in the comments. We'll talk about it later. Okay, those are things that are not necessarily in dispute. Now, let's fast forward a bit to 1996. What happens here? Hallmark shows up. What could Hallmark want with this? Who knows? They end up buying Filmation, which means they get the catalog of all those He-Man episodes, and they get the Orko rights. Okay, this is going to come up later, these Orko rights. We're going to talk about those because that's one of the bullets used to say that Mattel no longer owns Motu. So Hallmark buys Filmation, and then eventually it gets resold to another company called Entertainment Rights, gets sold to another company called Classic Media, gets sold to another company called DreamWorks, who renames it DreamWorks Classic, eventually gets sold to Universal. So we're just going to call it Hallmark/Universal. It's Hallmark in the past who made the deals. It's Universal who in the present gets to indulge in the deals. Okay, so this is where the story starts to converge into two realities, and I am going to cut over to browser here for a second, and this is a post. I will have a link to this if you so desire it in the description below. This is a post on the OAFA, the Online Action Figure Entertainment website, which is one of the older and more esteemed action figure toy collecting sites that's been around for a long time. I kind of trust these guys by their very sort of oldness, shall we say. So this post, which goes into a lot more depth than I'm going to do, basically states that after Hallmark/Universal purchased Filmation, they then went to Mattel and they acquired the entertainment rights. Okay, now what are entertainment rights? Entertainment rights are the ability to make some type of entertainment off the property in the form of, let's say, TV shows, like kids' TV shows, but it could also be something like maybe a puppet show, maybe it's He-Man on Ice, maybe it's He-Man the Ride, maybe it's He-Man on Broadway. All those are possibilities, okay, and that these guys now have the rights to do entertainment. This is different than the live-action movie rights, which currently Sony owns. I believe Canon Films had at the time, because they made that movie in '87, and I think Warner Brothers bought them out, and somehow Sony got involved. But this isn't about that. I'm just trying to say that there's multiple rights out there going to different companies, and one of them is Hallmark Universal, according to this website. Okay, so then the other story that diverges off of this strange fork in the road is that Mattel, thinking the Motu brand was dead, sold the whole thing to Hallmark, and that Hallmark then licensed back to them the toy rights, and just the toy rights, okay? Because that's all Mattel wants to do is make toys, and they don't want the other rights. That's what ex-employee has said. Now, ex-employee also happened to have been someone who managed one of the Motu toy lines. There have been different Motu toy lines over the years, and he was the manager of one of them, okay? And so he is the person that is saying that the whole thing was purchased and then relicensed back, and that is not that crazy, okay? To give you an example, when Apple computers were coming out, there was actually a legal entanglement from Apple Music, which is essentially the record label that the Beatles has started. If you look at the old vinyl records, you see they have that green apple on it, and that was the name of their company. They're still around, okay? So what happened is, years later, Apple computers eventually became a juggernaut, right? Now, in the original entanglement, Apple Music said that Apple computers could go on and exist as a computer company using the name Apple as long as they didn't compete with anything music related. But now that these guys are putting out iPods and they were launching their online, the Apple iTunes store, there's now a conflict. And so what happens is, because Apple computers is such a juggernaut, it ends up getting the trademark now for Apple Music, and they license it back to the record label, okay? That's what money gets you, kids. So this is kind of similar to that. They buy, according to ex-employee, they buy Masters of the Universe, and part of the deal is they license it back, who is allowed to make toys, and every toy they make, they would pay a pithy, as it were, but it would add up. All right, so what are the bullet points, as it were, from this ex-Mattel employee that proves his view of things? So first of all, this is somebody who made it pretty far up the chain, but not the furthest up the chain. So we are, as an audience, somewhat taking his word for it. All right? We assume that because he's a very important person and had access to Mattel archives, that perhaps with his own eyes he saw contracts, or maybe he spoke with someone in legal who told him, or maybe he spoke to someone who'd been there a while or who was in the know, who told him that Mattel didn't actually own Motu anymore. They just had toy rights that were licensed back to him, right? We're assuming that he has some type of privilege when he tells us these things, even though he's never come out and said, yeah, I spoke to a guy in legal, or yeah, here's the documents, I took a picture and now I'm going to, expose them, etc., that kind of thing. Okay, so there is that. We are taking it again, it's a pretty solid argument, but it's not rock solid. There's problems with it. And the problem with it is corporations themselves. Just because you get somewhere doesn't really mean anything, right? Yeah, okay, a captain of a ship. They know more than the lieutenant. They know more than the privates, right? But they don't know what the admiral knows, okay? They might know how to run the ship and where the ship's going, but they don't know the whole battle plan itself and where all the other ships are going, all right? So, and you don't want those people to know, because in war, if they get captured, then the enemy finds out your plan. And so, yeah, sure, you know more than a few people underneath you, but there's people above you who know more than you, and you're not going to know their information. That's the nature of the corporation and its ladder itself. So, just because someone comes out and says something, it doesn't mean that they necessarily know the correct answer. They may believe they know the correct answer, but they may actually be wrong and they may not know it. So you need to break away from that cult a bit. Okay, another thing that has come up by this ex-employee is that when they were running their toy line, they claimed that they had to pay royalties back to Filmation, i.e. Hallmark, Universal, whoever it was at the time, maybe it was DreamWorks when this was going on. And that would mean that they owned it, and Mattel had to pay them royalty back to make the toys. Now, some people have come out and said, well, if it was the Orko rights, like I mentioned earlier, then of course they would have to pay, because they've always paid to make toys of Orko to Filmation, because Filmation made a deal where they got to own those, right? And so maybe this ex-employee is just mistaken as to, you know, some characters were paid versus all of them. He's since said that they paid royalties on everybody. Now, somebody has rebutted that, saying, well, maybe what they did was they just made a flat fee where they paid a very, very small amount to Filmation, but they did it for every single character, so that way they wouldn't have any entanglements. They could plan the line. They wouldn't have to worry about who is in the line, who's not in the line, all that kind of stuff. It might actually save them money. Now, I kind of disagree with that opinion, because I believe if they could save money by going through and wrangling over every single thing, like, no, you didn't make this guy, we're not paying for him, that kind of, they would do that. That's my belief. If they could save money going the other way, they would. If they could save money paying a small fee on every character, they would do that. Both are plausible. One doesn't mean it's the right thing or the wrong thing per se, but it just means that this ex-employee could be legitimately mistaken. Again, the position where he was at, he thought they were paying for every character because they didn't own them. In fact, they were just doing a flat fee because it worked out. Who knows? What I'm saying is a solid argument, but not rock solid. There is some room for doubt in all of these. Okay, let's go the other direction. Things that suggest that the first story, where all they did was they sold the entertainment rights, is correct. And we're going to switch over to browser vision. Oh, this is fun, people. Are you having fun? This is indoor scarf weather, by the way, for those of you that don't know. So Mattel wins He-Man ownership lawsuit. First of all, when you read through this or you see the headlines or whatever, what this is about is a writer who created, and I told you we were going to get back to this, created the backstory of the characters in those first 4 He-Man mini comics that were included with the action figures. And so this guy was saying that he owned the copyright to those characters when he created the backstory, and that he was actually then licensing it to them. Mattel said, no, you were just a gun for hire that came in to write the stories. You did write the stories, you did create them, but you don't own them because you were working for us. It happens all the time when you work for a corporation. You don't actually own the work that you do, and very rarely is there ever a deal in place where you would own the work. It would be very, very rare circumstance. And this guy, I don't know if his name is Donald Glut or Donald Glut. I probably should know. I realize that he's an old school, old guard, probably now at this point considered royalty, who has written for a lot of different franchises like Transformers and some Spider-Man, and he also did an Empire Strikes Back adaptation. I realize this is a guy that we should probably all know. I don't really know anything about this guy, so I don't know how to pronounce his name. But Donnie G here is claiming that he was actually the owner of He-Man, and he's been licensing it to them. And so there's this lawsuit, and you might think, oh, this is a David and Goliath, how like his guy created He-Man and Mattel came and stole it from him. No, what you don't realize is that he's the defendant. Mattel is suing him. Mattel is bringing the lawsuit. They're the ones on the attack, and the reason is they don't want there to be any uncertainty and doubt as to who owns Masters of the Universe and the characters. And so they took this guy to court to settle it once and for all, essentially out in the open. I say that because here it is in the Hollywood Reporter 2014. So this isn't a lawsuit that he brought against them. They brought it against him because he was talking in public saying that he owned it, even though they had actually brought forth other interviews in the past where he described the job and pretty much mentioned that he was a gun for hire who created this stuff. Right. So in a YouTube video where about a year ago, where someone was talking about this exact same thread that I'm talking about now. Somebody said that the reason why Mattel was in court was because the original deal was between Mattel and Donnie G here, right? And so it was their due diligence for them to show up in court. Well, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because if Mattel had lost the lawsuit, okay, if they had lost the lawsuit, they wouldn't be able to then assign the copyright to this guy for He-Man, because they don't own him if Universal owns him, right? If Universal owns Masters of the Universe, Mattel can't then go to court with somebody and lose someone else's property. Like if your dog bites somebody in the park and that person sues you, your neighbor doesn't lose their car. And they're like, hey, Bob, where'd your car go? Like, my neighbor's dog bit somebody. Now my car's gone. It doesn't work that way. If Universal had bought it, Universal would be in court, and Mattel, right, because they were the original person that dealt with this guy, they could be brought in as a witness, but they wouldn't be on Universal's side. It wouldn't be Universal Mattel versus this guy. In fact, if anything, it might be Mattel and this guy against Universal, because that would be a really clever way for Mattel to get the copyright back, get it, say like, no, we did actually license it from this guy, and now he wants it back, and then they could buy it from him for cheap. They could work up this whole thing that way, but it's not that. It's Mattel owns it, and they're in court. Again, if you think Universal owns it, if Mattel loses, how does Universal give it up, right? They're like, we weren't in court. How do we give this thing up? Furthermore, if you think that like, well, it's not for the property, it's for the right to make the toys. Donald Glut is not a toy maker. He's not in court to try and get the contract to make toys. That doesn't make sense either. It's about the copyright of the character, not a business contract to license something to make toys, okay? Again, Mattel does not have the ability to lose the property if they don't own it, so they can't be in court. Now, we're not done there, although that would technically be a knockout on most planets. We're going to look around some more. Oh, by the way, there's plenty of sites that cover this on all different levels, from Hollywood Reporter type sites to some of these law sites like Casetext. So if you want to go through and read a lot of legalese, you're more than welcome. I think that we kind of get it. Now, we're going to go to a page called uspto.report, and then there's a whole bunch of like /tm/numbers. I'll put a link to it. Essentially, it is trademarks done by Mattel, and if we scroll down, we're in this section here. These are all the times Mattel has filed for a trademark on Masters of the Universe. Now, the way a trademark works is it's by a specific category of product or service. Let me give you an example. Let's say there's a company called Arrow that makes bicycles. They make kids' bikes, men's bikes, women's bikes, rocket bikes, e-bikes, whatever. They make bikes. Let's say there's another company out there called Arrow. But Arrow doesn't make bikes. Arrow makes staplers, and they make staples and staple guns, right? Okay, they make stuff for office supplies, and they have a trademark for Arrow and office supplies. That company can't then, if they want to make a bicycle, produce a bicycle with the name Arrow, because somebody in that category is already making it with that name. Similarly, if Arrow Bikes wants to come out with a line of staplers, they can't use the term, or they can't use the word Arrow. They can both exist as companies called Arrow. They can both have trademark of Arrow, just not in the same category, right? I would argue also that if you tried to come up with a name similar to Masters of the Universe, even if it wasn't in their category, there's a good chance that they could sue you or give you a cease and desist if they felt that you were actually using their name to try and sell your product, even though it doesn't compete with anyone. Let's say I made a motorcycle jacket state-of-the-art motorcycle jacket. It's $1,500, and it's called not Masters of the Universe, but it's called Master of the Universes. Okay, so it's a different name, but it's very close, right? And let's say Mattel doesn't make a leather jacket. Chances are, because they have enough leverage with all these other trademarks and services, that they would claim that I was actually trading on their name. In fact, I would have to go out of my way to make sure that in no way do I allude to any of their characters or their franchise in any way, right? That that I am not doing anything in any possible way that looks like I am trying to confuse the public as to who owns this. Because if they say, yeah, people think that this is a Masters of the Universe jacket because they didn't look closely at the tag, right? They might have a case. So even if you're not in the same category, there's a chance that these guys are strong enough to stop you. So if Universal owned Masters of the Universe, there's no way that Mattel could then go on to apply for a trademark. Now, if you look at this list, you can see that there's several that are green here in this category that say live, and there's some that say dead or canceled. And if you go look at any one of these, let me close a few tabs so we can figure out what's what. So here's one from 99, right? You scroll down, and we see that it is for toothpaste, meaning in 99, Mattel trademarked Masters of the Universe on toothpaste so they could put out a toothpaste with it, and after a while they quit making toothpaste, and now it's abandoned and canceled. If they want to do something else, like make kids' pajamas, they got to go file another trademark in kids' pajamas. And if they stop making it, then it's abandoned or canceled. And that's what we see here. We see a bunch of products that they made that were abandoned or canceled, and we see plenty that are live. And in fact, we see the original one for a toy figure going back to 1981, December 14th, right, is still live, still registered. There's still got it going. Now, there's one from 2020 of December, and we see that that is for entertainment services, namely providing movies, television programs, and webisodes. Streaming services, providing online computer games, providing an interactive website for entertainment purposes, featuring information, photos, and videos, all relating to children's entertainment. And so basically, they're trademarked it. And if you go to this site, right, you know that when you trademark something, right, you have to give an example of you using the trademark. Otherwise, it's considered abandoned, right? You can't just file it. You got to actually use it. You can't file it and sit on it. So what they do is, let's say you trademark a name to be used on a purse. You got to actually provide a picture of a purse with your trademark on it. And so in this case, when they did the last trademark in 2020 for, like I said, entertainment purposes, media, streaming shows, that kind of thing, here are some screenshots from Netflix with 3 of their shows on it, right? Here's a screenshot from Netflix with shows on it. Here's a screenshot, right? Here's 3 screenshots of it being used. You have to provide examples, and there they are. And so if Universal owned it, it would be Universal doing this, not Mattel, because they don't own Mattel. So Mattel's not a subsidiary of Universal. They're not doing this on Universal's behalf. They're not working for Universal. They're like, hey, I know you own it, but we'll trademark it for you, and we'll make sure it all goes down and happens. It's not working that way, okay? Mattel owns it, and here are the trademarks of it, and you can see that since 81 to 2020, they haven't stopped. There's been no break. They've continually been trademarking stuff in different categories, which means they still own it, right? So 2 strikes saying they still own it. And in fact, if we go to this He-Man and the Masters of the Universe Wikipedia page, right? Remember, they came out with 2 shows on Netflix. There's a show for kids, and then they also made a show for babies. And this is a show for babies, right? And we see who owns this. It's Mattel Television, right? And Mattel Television is a subsidiary of Mattel. So it's a company within Mattel that whose sole purpose is to make product shows, essentially, based on Mattel properties, including Motu. Now we find out that that it's comes out on Netflix. Netflix is essentially granted this right to make entertainment through the Universal deal. So it takes two halves. It takes Universal signing off, aligning with Netflix, and it takes Mattel signing off to give, because they own the trademark, they essentially own the brand, to allow them to collaborate. And I'm sure lots of money went all over the place both ways as it came in from the toys and the shows and everything. They all worked that out. It must have been a crazy legal system. Who knows if we can get one of these LawTube shows to maybe cover something like this? I don't know. All very exciting stuff. But you can see that with two things I've shown you, the lawsuit and the trademarks, that clearly these are legal entities, and Mattel to be able to participate to trademark this, for Mattel to be able to participate in court and defend this, means they have to be an owner of it, not someone who just has the license to the toys. If you disagree or you have an alternate plan at how this, that you could get to where Universal owns it but Mattel goes to court for it, you may comment away. I would love to have some back and forth discussion, etc. I don't think the final word is out on this yet, like we've been told. This is the year where time's up, where they are going to be, if it's true that the contract is over, we should be seeing something. We'll find out, folks. Anyways, it's been a lot of fun, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.